this English lesson, we'll read a BBC News article together. And as we read the article, you'll learn advanced English vocabulary in context. You'll learn the correct grammar and the correct pronunciation at the same time. This is an advanced article discussing the first ever video and images of the sun's south pole. If you can understand this article, your English is excellent. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started.
Our headline, first view of the sun's south pole filmed by spacecraft. So you can see the spacecraft in this image and you can see this incredible image of the sun. So notice here, the sun's south pole, so this is possessive. The south pole belongs to the sun. Now, because we have this double S, notice how this is pronounced in natural spoken English. Sun's south pole. Sun's south pole. So I would only pronounce one S, but when you do that, you can't take a pause between the words. Sun's south pole. Sun's south pole. Now, this is the headline of an article, and in headlines, they often leave out articles, so and the, and auxiliary verbs. They do that to make the headline as short as possible. Here, they included the article, the sun's south pole, but they didn't include the article here because first is an ordinal number. So you would say the first view. The first view. This is an important grammar point to remember because I live on the second floor because second is an ordinal number. Now it could be I work on the 54th floor or whatever it is. So don't forget this article the, it's required. Or to follow more of the structure from the headline, maybe this is the first video of Jennifer's that I've watched. Now notice two things here. I have this apostrophe S because of Jennifer's videos, but I don't write that because it's implied. So it's not required to understand, but you could add on another videos to show what the possessive is. But even without that noun, you would still add that apostrophe S to show the possession because it's implied that I have watched. Now this is in the present perfect because it suggests it's an ongoing action. You can watch another one of my videos. So next week it will be, this is maybe the 4th video or the 200th video because you've binge watched my videos, which I would absolutely love. This is the 200th video of Jennifer's that I've watched. So whether this is your first video and you're new here, welcome, or this is your 200th or more, put let's go in the comments if you're excited to watch more of my videos to improve your English. Put let's go in the comments. And don't worry about taking these notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Let's return to the headline. The first view of the sun's south pole. This is how you would say it. The sun's south pole. Now, filmed is actually the short form of has been filmed because it's the view. So the subject is singular. It has been filmed. It has been filmed by a spacecraft, which means any, or you could say the spacecraft because it's a specific one. So in full sentence form, aside from the headline, these are the additional words that you would need to form a grammatically correct sentence. Now, finally, let's learn about this story. The first ever, notice the first video. Ever just emphasizes it. The first ever video, it sounds stronger. The first ever video and images of the sun's south pole have been, notice here, have been, like here, has been filmed because we're in the article, not the headline. So correct grammar is required. You must include the auxiliary verbs, the articles, and everything else. Have been sent back. Now here, our subject is plural because we have video and images. So it's they have been sent back to Earth. So the structure is to be sent back because the videos and images, they're receiving the action. They're not doing the action. Sent back means returned. So this is something you can use in your regular speech because think of all the items you order on Amazon or any store, and then you send them back, you return them. So in the active structure, you can say, I sent back the shirt I ordered because it was too small. So this is the active verb because the subject, the subject is doing the action. Okay, so the structure is to send back. Your verb is send, so this is what you conjugate. In the past simple, it's sent. Sent. I sent back. So you'll have a flap T for pronunciation. I sent back. I sent back. Now, in the passive form, the subject here is the shirt. It's receiving the action, not doing the action. So it's very common to talk about the item. The shirt has been sent back. So to be, your verb to be is what's conjugated, has been sent back. So to be sent back, this is always in the third form. And then it's your verb to be that's conjugated. The shirt has been sent back. Let's review this again. The first ever, to emphasize, the first ever video and images, plural, of the sun's south pole have been sent back to Earth, have been returned to Earth by the European Space Agency's Solar Orbiter spacecraft. So this is the name of the spacecraft that we see here, and it belongs to the European Space Agency, which is why we have this apostrophe S. Let's continue. The new images will enable scientists to learn how the sun cycles between periods of raging storms and quiet times. So if there's a raging storm, it means a very intense storm, and intense in a negative way because rage is another word for anger. He was full of rage. He was full of anger. So a raging storm is an intense storm that can cause a lot of damage or destruction. And let's go back to enable. This is a more advanced way of saying allow. More precisely, it would translate to make it possible for. So the new images will make it possible for scientists to learn how the sun cycles. So we have a period of raging storms, intense, powerful, violent, and then quiet. So cycle, of course, means going between one and the other again and again. That would be the cycle.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
This is important because intense solar activity can affect satellite communication and knock out power grids on Earth. Here, the phrasal verb is to knock out. Now, your verb is knock, which of course is knock. Notice that K is silent. Knock, knock. And in this context, it means cause something, power grids, to stop working. So a power grid, that would represent all the poles with wires between them and multiple poles and wires all in one area. That would be the power grid. And when I visualize a power grid being knocked out, I imagine those grids, the poles actually falling to the ground. That's just what I personally imagine. So that might help you to imagine it and remember the meaning, because of course, if they're on the ground, most likely your power is not going to work. Maybe you would say, oh no, the power just went out. So here the power, and then your verb is to go, and then out, to go out. And then this is in the past simple. The power went out. So if the power went out, now you could say, there's no power. There's no power. Oh no, the power just went out. I think the storms knocked down the poles. So remember I told you I personally visualize the poles going like this. Well, there's a more precise phrasal verb, and you can say knock down to specifically refer to what I was suggesting. So if a pole was knocked down or a tree was knocked down, it means it goes from upright to on the ground. I think the storms knocked down the poles. And in this context, all you need to know is intense solar activity. So those periods of raging storms and quiet times can cause the power to stop working. So that's what you need to know from that. The new images show a shimmering bright atmosphere, which in parts reaches temperatures of 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. Let's review shimmering. You may not be familiar with this word choice, probably not the most common in your vocabulary. This is an adjective. It is also a verb. So the verb is to shimmer. Shimmer is when you might have shiny spots on your face, for example, because you're sweating a little bit. And also, there might be some sparkling. So often we refer to makeup as shimmering because it has that sparkling. So it's bright and light and sparkly with a little bit of shine. So think of shine and sparkle for shimmering. So it might be a common adjective to describe makeup or even some clothing or some things like a decorative pillow. And in the hot sun, I might say my forehead is shimmering, which would be because of the sweat and it's a little bit shiny. But it would probably be more likely to say, oh, Jennifer, your face is a little shiny. So before I do my video, I might dab my face with a Kleenex to get rid of the shine. And notice this use of in parts. So it means not the entire atmosphere, just parts of the atmosphere. And in parts reaches temperatures. So atmosphere, this is a singular. So new images show a shimmering bright atmosphere which reaches temperatures. So that's why we have reaches because it's conjugated with atmosphere, which is singular. And a million, this is, you could also say 1,000,000 because in this context, a million represents 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. So you put the plural on degrees. You do not put the plural on million. You put it on degrees or dollars. $1,000,000. It's the dollars that would have the S, not million. Let's keep going. Interspersed are darker clouds of gas. So let's look at this. Interspersed. Interspersed means that there are dark clouds, but they're in random places. So we have the atmosphere. So it's not that the dark clouds are neatly across the middle or only on the top, only on the bottom. There are dark clouds of gas throughout the atmosphere, but in a random pattern. So there might be a large clump here and then a small clump here, there. So there's no order or reason for their location. Now, interspersed are, you could also start with the subject and say darker clouds of gas are interspersed. And they're interspersed in the atmosphere, but you don't need to repeat that because it's obvious because we just read that. Now let's review this again. Interspersed are dark clouds of gas, which although much cooler, are still a searing 100,000 degrees. 100,000 degrees. So here they didn't add degrees Celsius because, again, we now know the temperature is in Celsius, so it's not required. 100,000 degrees. Now, this part of the sentence between the commas is additional, and it doesn't affect the grammar. So grammatically, this R is conjugated with darker clouds of gas. Darker clouds of gas are still a searing 100,000 degrees. And searing represents extremely hot. So here we changed from million to thousand, but again, remember the plural goes on degrees, not thousand. The pictures are the closest and most detailed ever taken of the sun and will help scientists learn how the star that gives us life on Earth, which of course this is the sun is the star that gives us life on Earth. So how the star that gives us life on Earth actually works. According to Professor Carol Mundell, ESA's director of science. So ESA, this was European Space Agency. So now that they've already identified what this means, they can use the acronym. And this, notice how even though I see it as the short form, which is used in written English just to be more concise, when you verbalize it, you can still verbalize it as the full form, which is professor. Just like this, you can say ESA, or you can see this and still say the full name, European Space Agencies. And here, notice this use of ever. It's not required grammatically because if you say the pictures are the closest taken, because this is in the superlative, I know it means the most. So the closest taken, the most detailed taken. You don't have to say ever taken, but again, it adds emphasis because ever means at any time. So now I know without a shadow of a doubt that this means that there has never been a closer or more detailed picture taken. And taken is used because you take a picture. So that's why we have taken. Now, also remember that you need your article the with the superlative. She is the tallest student in the class. Jennifer is the best teacher. You are the best student, of course. So you need the. Now, with and, you don't need to repeat the. So one the is used for both, or even if there were a third, because there's and, you don't need to repeat it. But you could say the closest and the most detailed. You absolutely can, but it's not required. Let's keep going. Today we reveal, so notice here we have quotations. So I know that these words are coming from someone directly, and this is the last person identified, so I will assume is coming from Carol unless otherwise stated. Today we reveal. Notice this pronunciation, reveal. So if you reveal something, it means you make it available to see, to touch, to taste, to watch, whatever it is, to make available for the first time. Today we reveal humankind's first ever, again, we're getting a lot of this use of ever, first ever views of the sun's pole. So again, the pole belongs to the sun, so that's why there's this possessive. Remember, it's always the sun, because it's unique. There's only one. This article, the, is always used. Views of the sun's pole. And again, this ever is not required. It adds emphasis because if you say the first views of the sun's pole, I know that there has never been other views because that's what first means. But saying first ever, it just adds more emphasis. Let's keep going. According to Professor Lucy Green, so we've changed professors. According to Professor Lucy Green of UCL, it has been hard to predict this activity with computer models of the sun because there has been no data on the migration of the magnetic fields towards the poles, but that has now changed. So this activity, we have to think about what activity was previously discussed, previously stated in the article. So what do you think of? When I think of the activity, I think of that cycling between the raging storms and the quiet times, because I don't think they've mentioned any other activity here. Yeah, so that activity would be all the way here. So often this will happen where you have to remember, well, what is this activity? It's whatever activity was last referred to. Now, as a writer, since it is quite separated, it may be useful to identify what this represents. So just keep that in mind. Hard to predict this activity with computer models. And notice here, they use the present perfect. So to be hard, and then your verb is to be, and it's conjugated in the present perfect. Now, when I see this, it has been hard. Oh, it's been hard. It suggests to me they've tried to do this in the past, but they've been unsuccessful. And that's the use of the present perfect, because if you just say it is hard to predict, which grammatically is correct, but now I don't have that sense that it's something that has been tried before. It's been hard. It's been hard to predict this activity. So a past action with a result in the present. There's been no data. So again, past until now. There's been no data on the migration of the magnetic fields towards the poles, but that has now changed. So this, again, that has now changed. So it's a completed past action, but there is a result in the present. So the completed past action could be, they now have these photos of the sun's south pole. And the result in the present is they can now analyze them and make those predictions. So the verb is to predict, and then the noun form is prediction, a prediction, or those predictions in the plural. And those predictions represents the predictions about the sun's activity. Now you can simply use the verb here to predict, but because I use the noun form in a different context, I used a new sentence. If I wanted to change this sentence and use the noun, just remember that you still need a verb. So the collocation, the verb that matches with the noun prediction is make. You make a prediction. So it's been hard to make those predictions. But now, because we have the noun, you would have to include an additional preposition about, because you make a prediction about something. So you have made many predictions about who will win or lose a sports game, for example. So you can use the verb or you can use the noun, but just remember that you have to make changes based on that. Let's keep going. We now have, so again, quotations. I'll assume it's the last person referenced. In this case, that is Lucy Green. We now have the missing piece of the puzzle, she told BBC News. The missing piece of the puzzle. This is a common expression. Maybe it exists in some form in your native language as well. So it's a metaphor. It represents that if you have that missing piece of the puzzle, well, then you've solved something complex. So that missing piece represents the solution to something complex. So you might, in a language context, you might be struggling with your listening skills, and then you see an email from me or a YouTube video from someone else that says, the missing piece of the puzzle is this. And then maybe the answer is shadowing native speakers, listening to native speakers. That's the missing piece of the puzzle. That's the one thing that will help you solve this complex problem. So it's commonly used in this metaphorical sense. So if you've made a lot of progress with your English and there was one thing that you're now doing differently, you might say shadowing native speakers was the missing piece of the puzzle. So your verb is the verb to be, and then the rest of this does not change. The missing piece, because there's one, so we have the, not the missing piece of the puzzle. And then this is in the past simple because it implies that you've solved the problem. And this is how you solved it. So it's a great expression. You'll hear it a lot. The ultimate goal is to develop computer models of the sun. So the goal of this machine, the spacecraft, they called it, the goal of that, of taking photos and videos of the sun's south pole and remember sending them back to Earth. The ultimate goal is to develop computer models of the sun so that this so-called space weather can be predicted. So notice here, to be predicted. The person is not doing the action. The object is receiving the action. So the space weather is the object. It is the one receiving the action, and the action is predict. So here we have our modal can, and we always use the base verb followed by a modal. That's why we have be. Now, you can say scientists are trying to predict the space weather. So here, scientists, this is your subject, and they're doing the action, are trying to predict. I can make this a little clearer and say are predicting to make it an action taking place now. Scientists are predicting. So this is your verb to predict conjugated in the present continuous with our subject scientists. They're doing the action. Scientists are predicting the space weather. Now, in the passive form, the space weather has been predicted by scientists. So to be predicted, and then you take your verb to be and you conjugate that. And you don't need to include by scientists, it's optional. So that's how it's being used here. And so-called is to suggest that space weather isn't the technical term. It's just commonly known as or commonly referred to, but maybe that's not a technical or official term. Let's keep going. Accurate forecasts will enable satellite operators. So we have this enable again. What's a more common word for it? Accurate forecasts will make it possible for satellite operators, or will allow satellite operators, but there's more because we have this comma, so there's a list. Power distribution companies, so companies that distribute power distribution companies, as well as aurora watchers, so that could be me and you, people who go outside to gaze at the stars. So it's often commonly called stargazers, average people who enjoy looking at the stars. Aurora watchers, stargazers, to better plan for intense solar storms. Now, just to avoid confusion, the word aurora does not refer to stars in general. An aurora, that represents the northern lights. And I actually just learned that aurora borealis, which I was familiar with, represents northern lights. I generally just call them northern lights, but there's another term which represents southern lights. And this is about the sun's south pole. So maybe that's why they use the term aurora watchers rather than just the more general term stargazers, which refers to anything in the atmosphere, including auroras, aurora borealis. So this term is new for me. Maybe it's not new for you. You can let me know in the comments if you're like, yeah, Jennifer, everyone knows about aurora australis. I don't know why you don't. You can let me know. I knew about aurora borealis, which I call northern lights. To me, this sounds like the more technical term, something a scientist would use, and this sounds like an everyday term that people use. Like, did you see the northern lights last night? They were beautiful. I'd love to see the northern lights one day. Or aurora australis, and then the common term is southern lights. I've never heard anyone talk about southern lights, only northern lights. Is it just me? Let me know in the comments. You can teach me something about our solar system, the galaxy. All right, and that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish, and you can focus on my pronunciation. First view of the sun's south pole filmed by spacecraft. The first ever video and images of the sun's south pole have been sent back to Earth by the European Space Agency's Solar Orbiter spacecraft. The new images will enable scientists to learn how the sun cycles between periods of raging storms and quiet times. This is important because intense solar activity can affect satellite communication and knock out power grids on Earth. The new images show a shimmering bright atmosphere which, in parts, reaches temperatures of 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. Interspersed are darker clouds of gas, which, although much cooler, are still a searing 100,000 degrees. The pictures are the closest and most detailed ever taken of the sun and will help scientists learn how the star that gives us life on Earth actually works, according to Professor Carol Mundell, ESA's Director of Science. Today, we reveal humankind's first ever views of the sun's pole, she says. According to Professor Lucy Green of UCL, it has been hard to predict this activity with computer models of the sun because there has been no data on the migration of the magnetic fields towards the poles. But that has now changed. We now have the missing piece of the puzzle, she told BBC News. The ultimate goal is to develop computer models of the sun so that the so-called space weather can be predicted. Accurate forecasts will enable satellite operators, power distribution companies, as well as aurora watchers to better plan for intense solar storms.
Do you want to keep learning English with the news? If you do, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.